We're on DAF Yud Dalet Amud Aleph, and we're about at the 11th or 12th line with the word Tanya, because once again we're talking about different types of produce that are subject to when do we consider it to be finished vis-a-vis determining what year it belongs to, right? So Tanya Rabbi Yossi Haglili Omer be'ospecha migornecha u'miyikvecha. Here the Torah is talking about the holiday of Sukkot, and it says that you celebrate Sukkot when you gather in from your goren, from the granary, and from your Yaakov, which is from your wine. So it's talking about the standard produce of Eretz Yisrael, the grain and the grapes. Ma goren v'yakev miyuchadim shegedelim al mei shana she'avra umisasrin l'shana she'avra af kol shegedelim al mei shana she'avra misasrin l'shana she'avra. And this basically tells you that just like Sukkot is sometimes considered to be part of the previous year, when we talk about the produce that's harvested on Sukkot, because like we said yesterday, it's because it grew a third of the way before Rosh HaShana, and since it grew a third of the way, we consider that the waters of the previous year were the primary contributor to this wheat's growth, and therefore it's considered to be part of last year's produce, and therefore when you take Trumas and Maasros, you take it from the previous year, and you cannot combine it with the produce of this year. So that applies to all produce which attains its primary sustenance at an earlier stage of its growth, meaning that you don't go according to the time of harvest, you go according to when the primary part of its growth was due to the waters that were infused into it during its earlier stages of growth. And that's why we said that grain, olives, and grapes, you go according to a third of its growth. That's when it's considered to have received its primary sustenance. Okay? Now, Yatsu, Yerakos, Shegedelim al Mei Shana Haba, Umisasrun L'Shana Haba. So this is to the exclusion of vegetables, because vegetables don't receive their primary sustenance at an early stage of their growth, but rather are dependent upon water constantly, without any interruption. And they're dependent upon water all the way up to the time of harvest, and that's why when we want to count as to what year they're from, we determine it by the date of the harvest, not by the date of the third of their growth. Okay, that's the way the Gemara is making this drasha from the pasuk, and as Rashi points out quite correctly, this is an asmachta. This is not a real drasha that we base a Torah law on, because all the laws of tithing of vegetables are only midrabanan. So Chazal are just pointing to a pasuk that alludes to this din derabanan. So that's first what Rabbi Yossi Haglili says is the way that you're supposed to say it. He says you contrast wheat, grain, and vegetables by looking at where the primary growth from water comes from. With grain, the primary growth comes at the point of a third of its growth, and with vegetables, the primary growth comes consistently from the time it starts growing until the very time of the harvest. Rabbi Akiva Omer, he has a slightly different approach to the pasuk. He says, "Ba'aspecha migornecha u'miyikvecha." Looks at the very same pasuk and he says, "Ma goren v'yekev miyuchadim shegedelim al rov mayim u'misasrin l'shana she'avra av kol shegedelim al rov mayim misasrin l'shana she'avra." He has a slightly different approach. His approach is not to look at when the primary water contribution to the growth of this produce is, but he says, look at the dependency of this produce on water. So that when it comes to grain and grapes, there is a dependency on water, but it's not a consistent, constant dependency. It's an intermittent dependency on water, because grain and grapes depend on rainfall. You don't need any additional irrigation other than rainfall. So if you don't water the wheat for one day, it's nishkaferlach, it'll rain the next week and the grain will be fine, right? But this is Yatsu Yerako Shegedelim al Kol Mayim Umisasrun L'Shana Haba. This is to the exclusion of vegetables which require constant watering, not intermittent watering like grain and grapes, but constant watering such that if it doesn't rain for a day, you have to irrigate it manually. And so therefore that's the difference between vegetables and grain. Grain, you go according to a third of its growth, and with vegetables you go according to its harvest. So the question is, my beinayu, what's the practical difference whether you learn it has to do with looking at what stage of its growth was water the primary contributor, versus is this produce dependent upon intermittent watering or constant watering? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Avahu bitzalam hasrisin upul hamitzri ika beinayu. The difference will be a certain kind of onion and a certain kind of legume. Now, Rashi says that this type of onion is a small onion, and apparently it's not as dependent upon watering as other vegetables are, as other onions perhaps are. And the same thing is true with this Egyptian bean. It's really unclear from the Gemara whether it's these specific species or whether these are examples of a general category. Ditnan, bitzalim hasrisin upul hamitzri shemana mehamayim shloshim yom lifnei Rosh HaShana. The Mishnah says that if these two kinds of species, this small onion and this Egyptian bean, that if you stop watering them 30 days before Rosh Hashanah of the new year, misasrin l'sha'avar, then even though normally vegetables go according to the date of harvest, and you harvest this after Rosh Hashanah, nevertheless, since you stopped watering them 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, clearly their sustenance from water came from the year before, and therefore they count from the year before. They are conjoined with all the produce that was harvested from the year before. Umutarin bashvius, and therefore if the new year is a Shemitah year, they don't have any kedusha of Shemitah. V'im lav, but if not, if you were consistently watered them, and up until Rosh Hashanah, or at least within 30 days of Rosh Hashanah, then you harvest them after Rosh Hashanah, Asurin Bashvias, then they have the Kedusha, they have the restrictions of Shemitah, Umis Asrin L'Shana Haba, and they count as far as the Trumas and Maestros of the new year. So Rashi brings us two opinions as to when we want to talk about the difference between Rabbi Yossi Haglili and Rabbi Akiva, what is this Mishnah indicative of? So the first explanation in Rashi is that this Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, take a look at, quite simply, the primary stage of growth where water is the major contributor to this produce's growth. And so since we've been able to establish that this vegetable was not dependent upon water for its growth with going into the new year, then we definitely ascertain that it is from the previous year. Like Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, that grain is different from vegetables because you look at the date of the main contribution of water to this object's growth, to this produce's growth. So with grain, it's a third of its growth, and with vegetables, it's constant all the way up until the harvest. But since this is not all the way up until the harvest that it was watered, it clearly belongs to the previous year. According to Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand, since this is a species that is normally dependent on constant watering, he would not hold like this Mishnah, and he would rather say that it does belong to the new year because you harvested it in the new year. That would be the machlokus about these specific kinds of cases between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Haglili. There's a second opinion in Rashi which is a little bit harder to understand, and Rashi basically tells us that no, just the opposite, that this Mishnah goes only according to Rabbi Akiva. By virtue of the fact that you treated this onion or this bean differently from the way that you would normally treat it, it has now converted its status from being a vegetable type of produce to being a grain type of produce. And like Rabbi Akiva had said, that since you've made it such a type of produce that is not constantly dependent upon water because you haven't watered it for 30 days, it counts, you go according to its, you treat it now like a grain type of vegetable which is dependent on rov mayim and not kol mayim, an abundance of water, but intermittently and not on constant watering. And therefore this Mishnah goes like Rabbi Akiva and not like Rabbi Yossi Haglili. It's a little bit harder to adapt to that position, but I'm just giving you the perspective that the bottom line in this Gemara is that there will be practical differences between Rabbi Yossi Haglili and Rabbi Akiva in certain nuanced cases where you have a vegetable, but it's not being watered constantly. Okay, let us go weiter. Now we go to the next part of the Mishnah. Be'echad bishvat Rosh HaShana le'ilan. The Mishnah had said that on the first of Shavat, it's a machlokas. We know that for other kinds of produce, Rosh HaShana is the cutoff date, whether it's from the previous year or the new year. That's what we've been learning all along. With tree fruit, right? So then it's different. With tree fruit, it depends on Shavat. And it's a machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, whether it's the first of Shvat or whether it's Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat. Now, obviously, as you know, we paskin like Beis Hillel. Now, what do we mean by this? What we mean is that if, let's say, this year is a Shemitah year, then even as long as fruit was budding on the trees before Tu B'Shvat, that fruit does not count as Shemitah fruit because it's still part of last year. And the reason is because since the fruit got its primary sustenance from water from last year's season, rainy season, and not from this year's rainy season, then it doesn't have the kedusha of Shavias. But if it starts budding after this date, whether it's the 1st or the 15th of Shavat, so then you know it got its primary sustenance from this year's rainfall, and therefore it has the din of Shemitah. Okay, and the same thing would be true vis-a-vis, let's say if you harvested some fruit before Shavat and some fruit after Shavat, you wouldn't be able to tithe them together. Let's say if last year was year 2 in the Shemitah cycle, and this year is year 3 in the Shemitah cycle, so last year's produce is subject to Meiser Rishon and Meiser Sheni. Year 3 is subject to Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani. Great, good. Just wanted to make sure everyone's following along. And so therefore you'd have to separate them out, and you'd have to, apples go here, and the other apples go here, and you'd have to tithe them separately.
Just interesting. So like during a Shemitah year, it's possible a farmer goes to this field and goes to trees that belong to previous Shemitah year and harvests it and takes it in.
Yeah.
It's like Marasayan. It looks like he's
you're allowed to harvest fruit during a Shemitah. You just can't work the soil. You can't cultivate it, but you're allowed to harvest.
Don't you have to leave it for?
No, that's only after it's. What we say is that anyone can come in and take,
right? But
you're not precluded from taking also.
Right, but you're not allowed to hoard it like for yourself.
You can bring it in and keep it only as long as it's available out in the field. So as long as the law by Shemitah is that as long as it's still available, the fruit is still growing out in the field, then you can keep it in your house. Once it's no longer available out in the field because it's no longer that season, then you're not allowed to keep it yourself.
So it's available, you could take...
Yeah, take as much as you want.
But the Shemitah for that year starts at Rosh HaShana for the fruit also, even though the year for the fruit...
The Shemitah starts at Shvat. And it's only for grain, grapes, olives, vegetables.
No, but I mean that pear tree, whatever. That would...
I believe for a pear tree, it doesn't start until Shavat, as far as the Kedusha Shvius. That seems to be what I hope I'm not making a mistake in this halacha, but it seems to be that's what the Mishnah is saying. Yeah, this year's a Shemitah year. So my time. So the Gemara says, what's the reason? Why is tree fruit different? Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Oshi, Ahol v'yatzu rov gishmei shana v'adayin rov tekufa mi-bachutz. The answer is that by the 1st or the 15th of Shavat, most of the rain has already fallen, but it's still the majority of the season is still yet to be elapsed. So Maika Amar, what does that mean? Yet the majority of the season is still yet to elapse. That is to say, even though we're still not finished with the winter season and there's still plenty of winter left, but since the majority of rainfall has happened, then you can be assured that any tree that buds after Tu B'Shvat is getting its rainfall from this year and not getting it from last year. Tana Rabbanan, Maisa Rabbi Akiva. This is an important story, which we'll reflect upon in the next Gemara. Rabbi Akiva once shaliked esrog be'echad b'shvat. He harvested an esrog. It's not clear whether it was just one esrog or multiple esrogim, but he harvested an esrog on the 1st of Shvat. V'nohag bo shnei isurin, echad kedivrei Beis Shammai ve'echad kedivrei Beis Hillel. So he was machmir in both directions. He treated it like it was from the 2nd year, so he had to take Meiser Sheni from it. And he also treated it like it was from the 3rd year and took Meiser Ani from it as well. And Echad Kedivrei Beis Shammai, Vechad Kedivrei Beis Hillel. He did both the chumras of Beis Shammai and to be machmir like Beis Hillel. In other words, according to Beis Shammai, this fruit is already from the new year. But according to Beis Hillel, it's from the previous year because it's not Tu B'Shvat yet. So that's the simple understanding. But Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Omer Lo Minhag Beis Shammai Beis Hillel Nahag Ba Ela Minhag Rabban Gamliel v'Rabbi Eliezer Nahag Ba. No, it's not that Rabbi Akiva was machmer both like Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. He was machmer both like Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Gamliel. Let's explain. Did nan esrog shava le'ilan begimel derachim uliyerek bederech echad. That the first part of the Mishnah says that an esrog is unique among trees in the sense that, number one, it's much more dependent upon water, upon irrigation, than other species. Like it's, first of all, they say that citrus in general needs a lot more water because it's a very juicy fruit. So the esrog tree needs a lot more irrigation. So in that respect, it's more like a vegetable because just like vegetables need constant irrigation, so too an esrog tree needs constant irrigation. Also, an esrog is a perennial fruit. You can have an esrog growing on a tree throughout the entire year. It can even be on the tree for 2 or 3 years before it's harvested, which is not true by other fruit, which is seasonal. Like when it's apple season, the apple will grow in that season, and then it'll fall off the tree. Or what?
That's what the Gemara says creates a dar because it always has.
Right, it's a perennial. That's right. So comes along the first part, and the Rabbi Gamliel, and he says Shava le'ilan megimel derachim. It's analogous to trees in 3 aspects: la'orla, u'laravoy, v'lashvias. As far as the laws of orla and ravai, which have to do with the early years of the planting of the tree. First 3 years, the produce is usher. 4th year, bring it up to Yerushalayim, and it has the same laws of trees as far as the hilchos shmita are concerned, which we won't concern ourselves with right now. V'layerek b'derech echad, but it is similar to vegetables in one aspect because of this need for irrigation. Shebishas lekitaso isuro diver magamliel. It only becomes subject to completion for meiser purposes at the time of harvest, whereas by other trees it has to do at the time of budding, the time of chanata, right? But when it comes to harvesting, when it comes to esrogs, it's the time of harvesting. So since the story was that Rabbi Akiva harvested the esrog on the 1st of Shvat, then it turns out that if you go like Rabbi Gamliel, it belongs to the new year. But since the Chanata was before the 1st of Shvat, if you go like the other opinion, like Rabbi Eliezer, which we'll see in just a second, it belongs to the previous year. Rabbi Eliezer, Omer Esrog Shav Elilin L'chol Davar. And like I just mentioned, Rabbi Eliezer says, no, an esrog is like a tree in all respects, and therefore you go according to Chanata, the budding, you don't go according to the time of harvest. And therefore, even though Rabbi Akiva harvested it after the 1st of Shvat, it nevertheless counts as part of the previous year. So first of all, the Gemara asks a very basic question, which is, Umi avdin and kitrei chumri. Since when does a person have a right to go and within the very same issue of halacha to go be both machmir like 2 contradictory opinions, which means like this: the Hatanya, as the Brisa says, la'olam halacha kedivrei beis Hillel, the harot salasus kedivrei beis Shammai osa kedivrei beis Hillel osa. That we always paskin like Beis Hillel. However, a person has a right to sometimes to paskin if he wants to like Beis Shammai, or to paskin like Beis Hillel. Now that statement is in itself contradictory, because if you're telling me the halacha is always like Beis Hillel, how can you tell me that a person has a right to go sometimes like Beis Shammai if he wants to? So the Gemara in Eruvin asked this question, and it says, Kan kodem baskol, kan la'achar baskol. Historically, there was a time, at some point in Jewish history, either before or after the Churban, where a heavenly voice issued forth and said that we paskin always like Beis Hillel. So once that baskol came out, a person doesn't have a right to choose to paskin like Beis Shammai. But before the baskol came out, you had a right to decide, I'll go in this halacha like Beis Hillel, and this halacha like Beis Shammai. And then it says,
we don't listen to baskols.
We don't listen to. That's a very good. That's a very good question. Lo b'shamayim hi. It's a good kasha. It's a good kasha. So.
Right, you mentioned
Right. So you have to be miyashev the Gemaras. It seems like the base not only was the baskol the thing that supported it, but you'd have to say that Chazal themselves accepted the baskol and instituted it. Anyway, mekulei Beis Shammai, mekulei Beis Hillel Rasha. But if a person takes the leniencies of Beis Shammai and the leniencies of Beis Hillel in the same halachic issue, then he's a wicked person because he's contradicting himself in order to do things that are most expedient for him. But mechumrei beis Shammai, mechumrei beis Hillel, olav hakasav omer v'hakasil b'choshech halach. If he's machmir in the same halachic issue, both like beis Shammai and beis Hillel, then he's called by the pasuk a fool who walks in darkness. Now, let me just clarify. Rashi tells us they have to be very careful about this. This is not a general rule for everything. If a person wants to go vis-a-vis halacha A and paskin lechumra like beis Shammai, and when it comes to halacha B, a totally separate issue, wants to paskin like beis Hillel lechumra, or vice versa, kula, that's perfectly okay. That's not a self-contradiction. What we're talking about over here is within the same halachic issue or the same halachic object, right? So, for example, we're dealing with the same esrog over here. So to say that I'm going to be machmir like beis Shammai and treat it like it's from year 3 rather, and I'm going to be machmir like beis Hillel and treat it like it's from year 2, that is self-contradiction within the same esrog. The example that Rashi gives from the Gemara in Eruvin is like, for example, when it comes to a spine. So the question that is discussed by Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai in a couple of areas of halacha, what is a fully intact spine? So Beis Hillel say that you need all of the vertebrae of the spine. If one vertebra is missing, then it's no longer a complete spine. Beis Shammai say, no, even if one vertebra is missing, it's a complete spine. If two vertebrae, thank you, Mr. Chiropractor. If two vertebrae are missing, so then it's considered to be a deficient spine. Now there are ramifications, both l'kula and l'chumra, in this halacha. So for example, when it comes to the laws of tumah, we know that an entire spine, if that's all you have of a human corpse, just the spine inside a building, then you'll have tumas ohel throughout the entire room, right? So according to Beis Hillel, if one vertebra is missing, so then there's no more tumah. That's a kula, right? And according to Beis Shammai, if one vertebra is missing, it's still a whole spine, and therefore there is tumah. But there's also you have to switch it, because there's also halacha about trephus. If an animal has one vertebra of its spine missing, according to Beis Hillel, that's deficient, and therefore the animal's a treifa. That's a chumrah now, according to Beis Hillel. Whereas, according to Beis Shammai, still a kosher animal until it has two vertebrae missing, right? So you see that. So if a person were to say, you know what, I'm going to be machmir like Beis Shammai when it comes to tumah, and I'll be machmir like Beis Hillel when it comes to trephus, so that's inconsistent. That's where we say that a fool walks in the darkness, right? And the same thing, therefore, applies to the issue of esrog over here, too. Why was it appropriate for Rabbi Akiva to be machmer, to take meiser sheni and meiser ani from the same esrog? That's called unnecessary being machmer. So ela ike beis Shammai b'kuleihon uv'chomreihon, ike beis Hillel b'kuleihon uv'chomreihon. So, and as this brisa completes itself, it says you either have to be consistent and be mekel and be machmer like Beis Shammai, or be mekel and be machmer like Beis Hillel. So the Gemara so that's the question on Rabbi Akiva. How could he be machmer in the same esrog? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Akiva gamrei istapak le v'lo yada I Beis Hillel be'echad b'shvat amru I b'tesvav b'shvat amru. The answer is, says the Gemara, it's not that Rabbi Akiva was hedging his bets between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. It's that Rabbi Akiva did not know whether the opinions in the Mishnah were Beis Shammai saying the first of Shvat, Beis Hillel saying Tu B'Shvat, or vice versa. He wanted to paskin like Beis Hillel, but he wasn't sure what shita was Beis Hillel and what shita was Beis Shammai. And in that situation, since he had a suffix in what the halacha was, right, there's two opinions and I don't know, and I want to hedge my bets, I'll go by like both opinions, but I know there's only one opinion that I want to paskin like, which is Beis Hillel, but I'm not sure what Beis Hillel said. Then it is legitimate to say I'll be machmer like both. So now let's go to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. What did he say? Lo minhag Beis Shammai Beis Hillel nohag ba, ela minhag Rabbi Gamliel v'Rabbi Eliezer nohag ba. Rabbi Akiva was in doubt about whether the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, that you, with an esrog, you go according to the harvest date, or whether the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer, that you go according to the chanata, to the budding date. Be'echad b'shvat ke Beis Shammai nohag ba. And then obviously, so what's the issue over here? So This is really a question. This really, you phrase it as a question, because essentially then what that means is that Rabbi Akiva was paskening like Beis Shammai. Really, he holds that the first of Shvat is the Rosh HaShana for trees. If you go like Rabbi Gamliel, so then this is because I'm harvesting on the new year, so then it goes according to the new year. But if you go according to Rabbi Eliezer, which says that it goes according to the budding, since it budded before the first of Shvat, it belongs to last year's produce. But if the cutoff date is the first of Shvat, then it turns out that Rabbi Akiva is passing like Beis Shammai, not like Beis Hillel. That's not normative. Rabbi Akiva always paskins like Beis Hillel. So how do you get out of that? Amar Rabbi Chanina v'itema Rabbi Chananya hacha be'esrog shechantu peiros of kodem tes vav de'idach Shvat askinan uvedinu afilu kodem lochenu ma'aser shehaya kachaya. So the Gemara gives a very interesting answer. The issue over here was that the fact, don't get caught up in the fact that he harvested it on the first of Shvat. That just happens to be incidental. That happens to be that just by coincidence, that's when he happened to harvest it. But this story is not about the first of Shvat. This story is about the fact that this fruit, this esrog, started budding last year before Tu B'Shvat. And Rabbi Akiva harvested it after Tu B'Shvat of last year. It could have been in Adar. It could have been in Nisan. It could have been in Tammuz. It could have been in Elul. It could have been in Tishrei. It happened to be that it went all the way until the following year, the first of Shvat. But the point is, the question was, since it was budding already last year before Tu B'Shvat, is it from last year or is it from this year? Ravina Amar Kruch Vitani Lo Echad Bishvat Haya Ela Tu Bishvat Haya Velo Minhag Beis Shammai Beis Hillel Nohag Ba Ela Minhag Rabbi Gamliel Rabbi Eliezer Nohag Ba. Ravina has a different answer. He says that we don't really, the original version of the Brisa is not comprehensive. Really, when Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda is arguing with the version of the story about what Rabbi Akiva did, he's arguing actually in 2 points. Not only does he argue with the fact that Rabbi Akiva was not hedging his bets between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, but rather between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer, but he also argues as far as the date of the story. You, Tanakama, say that the date of the story was on the first of Shvat. No, it wasn't. It was on Tu B'Shvat, because Rabbi Akiva paskins like Beis Hillel. And therefore, that's what Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says. He harvested it on Tu B'Shvat. And the question is, do we go like Rabbi Eliezer, who says it's part of the, or Rabbi Gamliel says this is now part of the new year because you go according to the harvest date, or do you go like Rabbi Eliezer, who says you go according to the budding date, which was before Tu B'Shvat? Next, Amar Rabba Bar Rav Huna, Hashta da Amar Rabbi Gamliel, Esrog Achar L'Kitaso Isuro, Kiyerek, Rosh HaShana Shalo Tishrei. Comes along Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, says an independent statement addressing this machlokas between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer. Now that Rabbi Gamliel has told us that because an esrog tree is different, because it's so much more dependent upon irrigation than other trees, and therefore you go according to the harvest date to determine what year it's a part of, well then you have to treat it like a vegetable as far as it's Rosh HaShana. Just like by vegetables the Rosh HaShana is Tishrei, so too the esrog tree, the fruit of the esrog, the cutoff date is no longer Tu B'Shvat, the cutoff date is the first of Tishrei, which goes contrary to everything that we've just been discussing. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, let's challenge this with the following brisa. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, Likeit esrog erev Tu B'Shvat, if you harvest an esrog on the eve of Tu B'Shvat, Ad shelo tov hashemesh, before sunset, v'chazav likeit mishu tov hashemesh, and then you harvest another esrog after sunset of Tu B'Shvat, so ein tormanu ma'asrin mizeh al zeh. You cannot combine the two esrogim to take trumas and maasros from one over to the other. Lefi she'ein tormanu ma'asrin lo min hachadash ala yashin v'lo min yashin ala chadash. Like we've learned before, you can't take last year's produce and tie that together with the new year's produce and vice versa. Haisa shlishis nechneses l'revius. If, let's say, for example, this was year 3 going into year 4. So in other words, this new year, which has Tu B'Shvat in it, is year 4 of the Shemitah cycle, which is normally subject to Meiser Sheni. But last year was the 3rd year, which is subject to Meiser Ani. So Meiser Rishon or Meiser Ani. Shlishis Meiser Rishon or Meiser Ani, Revius Meiser Rishon or Meiser Sheni. So therefore, the esrog that was harvested before Tu B'Shvat is part of year 3, and therefore it is subject to Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani. The esrog that was harvested on Tu Bishvat is part of year 4, and is subject therefore to Meiser Rishon and Meiser Sheni. So the Gemara now says, what do you see from this brisa? Man shamas le da'azel basar lakita. What Tana goes according to harvesting? Because this brisa is talking about the harvest date. So that's only Rabbi Gamliel, Ukatani Shavat, and it says clearly that the cutoff date for harvesting esrogim is Shavat. So it's impossible, Rabbi Barafuna, what you're saying to be true. Ella I itmar hachi itmar. So if anything was said, it was stated as follows: Amar Rabbi Barafuna, afal gavda Amar Rabbi Gamliel esrog lakita ki yerek Rosh HaShana shalo Shavat. So rather, Rabbi Rav Huna said as follows: even though you treat an esrog like a vegetable, in that you go according to its harvest date, nevertheless, it still has the aspect of treeness in that its new year cutoff date is Tu Bishvat and not Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Have a wonderful day.